Today's video almost feels like I'm choosing between two of my favourite children, but we're looking today at the Nebula Cosmos Laser 4K. This is in Kickstarter at the moment, soon to be released, and I did a video on it just a few days ago. And we're going to compare it to this, the Xgimi Horizon 4K Pro. Now this is one which again we did a little while ago. It's a great little machine, but which one of these two is going to be right for you? Well, we'll hopefully answer some of your questions. Don't forget to hit the red button to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up and click the notification bell to get my next video first. So just before we go through the head-to-head, those of you with a keen eye may notice that the top of the Xgimi Horizon Pro is slightly lifted. Now there's a reason for that, and it's because my dog chased my cat and knocked it over. And since then it's got a slight lift. Everything else works perfectly fine, there is no other issue with it, but I wanted to let you know just in case you noticed it. Now obviously it's good that it survived that little impact, however I would say that the Nebula is probably built to a better standard. It feels like it could survive a few of these tumbles, whereas the Xgimi is a little bit more plasticky and so therefore it wouldn't. On the back however I would say that the Xgimi obviously is far better connected. It has double the amount of HDMI ports, double the amount of USB ports, it also has an optical and it has the Ethernet port as well, so that's again something different. However with the Nebula it has got the power built into it, there is no power brick. So not having that power adapter does make it a little bit more flexible. However, the remote control with the Nebula, in my opinion, although it's got some shortcut buttons on it, it is just nowhere near as stylish or premium feeling as the Xgimi. But guys, you will have to then negotiate that power brick which comes with the Xgimi. The Nebula does have the upgradable Nebula 4K streaming dongle which slots in the back. With the Xgimi, it's just the built-in software which is already there. Just for your own ease of following this video, if we're showing a screen and it's the Xgimi that I'm demonstrating, you'll see the Xgimi in the bottom right corner, and likewise if it's the Nebula, I'll pop the Nebula up there. Okay, the setup process for both projectors is actually pretty similar. They use an autofocus, which is like a camera on the front of the actual device, which then sends out and measures and sets the screen. The Xgimi works brilliantly, and it's also got an extra feature which the Nebula hasn't, and that is obstacle avoidance. So if you are projecting against a wall, for instance, and there's something in the way like a door or a big plant, it will automatically detect that and then reposition. However, for most people that are using a screen, it's going to be a feature that you never use, so it's not that relevant. Now obviously both projectors also have manual Keystone Correction, so you can go in and drag the corners of the screen, so there's no real excuse for you not getting a very good looking screen. It's definitely something on both projectors which I really love, and it's something I love about the smart projectors nowadays. So just before we show you some picture comparisons, the specs of these two projectors, well, they are similar in some ways and different in others. I wouldn't worry too much about what is the headline spec, it's more about how they look. You've obviously got the laser light source with the Nebula, and it's an LED light source with the Horizon Pro, but that gives you a similar amount of hours. Contrast ratio is 1000:1 on the Nebula, and it's not published from Xgimi. The sound, although there is extra sound system on the Nebula, it's not terrible on the Xgimi, but definitely the Nebula has got the better sound. Okay, so this first test is going to be with lights on and the window blind open. This is taken around 12 o'clock midday, so it is a very, very bright room, so hopefully you can get an indication. I will split the screen in a second so that you can see these head to head, but I just wanted to show you how well the individual projectors do on their own, first of all. Now I did use this scene the other day to show the lack of contrast on the Nebula, and it's probably going to be similar on both, but hey, we'll wait and see and have a look at it. But this was the scene that I saw when I froze the frame here because it just lost a lot of the detail within the writing. Now I did speak to Nebula about this, and they said it's down to the extra brightness in the Nebula. However, when I adjusted the brightness going from 100 right the way down to nothing, it didn't bring any of that detail back. This is now the Xgimi that you're looking at, and again I think it's a very similar picture, very watchable during the day. You're not going to have any problems at all, but you do get, maybe through lack of brightness, a slight bit of extra contrast. So we'll come on to some head-to-heads in just a second, but you'll probably notice that the Nebula is slightly brighter and the Xgimi is slightly duller. Now that will mean that if you're doing a head-to-head like this, where the right-hand side of the screen is the Xgimi, the left-hand side of the screen is the Nebula, then you're probably losing some detail in the darker scenes with the Xgimi. And likewise, in the brighter scenes, like I showed you earlier, you're losing a little bit of detail with the Nebula. So, you know, they've both got their positives and they've both got their negatives, and it's really just going to be down to you to work out which one is right for you. But both of them, guys, are producing a brilliant picture during the day. Okay, so for the next couple of minutes I've got some nighttime footage, and here you can really see how well these projectors do. Now I do have to say, and I said it right at the very beginning, it's a little bit like choosing your favourite child, because both the images here look absolutely fantastic. I think I prefer the colours on the Nebula. Certainly in this scene it feels like it's a little bit more colour accurate and not quite as blue as the Xgimi. However, I would say that the Xgimi gives a greater deal of sharpness to the picture, but you are losing some detail in the darker scenes. So it really is a bit of a mixed bag, but as I said earlier, they're both pretty good. Now this scene is going to be a really good test for you. On the left hand side you've got the Nebula, the right hand side you've got the Xgimi, and you can see the difference in the brightness between the two. Now when we're inside this train here you can see the big differences. There's definitely a brightness advantage on the Nebula, but when we come to the guy's face now you can see it doesn't affect the colours. The colours are probably more accurate still on the Nebula than they are on the Xgimi. Now I'm going to come onto a screen in a second where we've got some sharpness detail which I'm going to demonstrate to you, and that's where you get a little bit more detail, and in these clouds for instance you see more detail on the Xgimi. So a couple of things just to bear in mind while you're watching this is that the Nebula is still in beta software, and so we may well see more improvements both in firmware and general software, whereas the Xgimi product obviously is already released. Now there obviously are going to be some differences between the two, but they're both set in movie mode. This is the Nebula on the dark scene with the brightness obviously higher, and so therefore it's blown out that little bit of text, and when we look at the Xgimi the whole screen is darker but you get a little bit more of the text. Now what I would love to see is somewhere between the two. I've taken this still image so that you can compare the two. Again, the Nebula is on the left, the Xgimi is on the right, and here hopefully you can see that I think the Xgimi is slightly sharper. However, colour accuracy probably goes to the Nebula. What's your thoughts? So guys, I guess the Nebula is the one that I would carry around if you are going to be wanting to use a projector outdoors in the garden. This is probably the more robust one that you can take to different places, and the Xgimi one is more of a fixed one, I would guess. You do obviously with the Xgimi get the extra input, so if that's going to be an important buying decision for you, then obviously bear that in mind. However, there are workarounds for that with the Nebula. You can add a dongle and use something similar to that if you wish. The Xgimi on top has the physical buttons, which are a little bit tricky to find at night if you're operating those, whereas as you can see the Nebula ones light up and they're very easy to locate. Also with the Nebula you do have the app, and so therefore that is again another nice feature, and it makes it very easy to operate in a darkened room. You literally just swipe around the screen and it works brilliantly. Okay, so comparing them head to head has been an absolute joy. They're both great machines. These are the highlights I've pulled out for both of them. The Nebula probably is the brighter picture with the better colour accuracy and great sound, but the Xgimi is sharper, certainly in movie mode. I guess with both of these projectors you can play about in the custom settings and then you'll probably end up getting them even closer together. I like the fact that you've got the app, and the robust build quality on the Nebula means it's the one that I would buy if I was taking it places and using it in different settings. However, if connectivity is an issue, it's the Xgimi. What I would say though, in my humble opinion, I think that these ought to be priced very similarly. I do not see that there's one with a massive advantage over the other one, and so therefore I think that these will end up around the same sort of price. So my friends, let me know what you think, and is there anything that I've missed which would give you the reason to buy one or the other? Just drop a comment in the box below. Thanks again for watching. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.